this financial year has not been positive for our industrial production, as the index for industrial production hit a 9-month low of only 1.2% in May 2025. Hello and welcome to Drishti IAS. My name is Saloni Nankyoliar, and in this video we will try to understand the reasons for this decline, which sectors were the most hit, and how can we ensure that they move back to the path of recovery. So in May 2025, the index for industrial production, it hit a 9-month low of only 1.2%. In fact, in April also it was not great, it was only 2.6%. And the average growth so far this year is only 1.9% in comparison to 5.7% last year. So if you look at the difference, 5.7% and 1.9%, the difference is very, very stark, which tells us that our industrial production has fallen significantly. Now, if we look at the basics of what IIP is, so IIP, or Index for Industrial Production, it deals with the production of goods. It measures the production of goods across three major sectors. What are those three major sectors? Manufacturing, mining, and electricity. So manufacturing makes up approximately 77% of this calculation, mining is close to 14%, and electricity is somewhere around 8% of the calculation. And the base year for calculating IIP is 2011-12. And this year's data has told us that the industrial production is suffering a lot. And let us see which sectors are the most hit. So electricity sector, it contracted at minus 5.8%. In fact, one of the possible reasons for this contraction in May could be an unusual cool May. For example, there was an early onset of monsoon, so let's say people might not have invested a lot in electrical appliances like ACs and coolers, so that could also be a reason that the electricity sector, it saw a reduction. In fact, the industrial consumption also reduced, and that is also a reason that electricity consumption went low. Then the manufacturing sector also saw a decline. So both these sectors, manufacturing and electricity, they make up a huge amount of IIP, and both these sectors saw a decline. That is the reason that IIP as a whole also saw a decline. And in manufacturing sector, we saw something significant, that the durables and non-durables, both these types of consumer goods, they saw a decline for the first time since 2023. So what are durable goods? Durables are the goods that last for a longer duration and they are not replaced frequently. For example, electrical appliances, laptops, ACs, refrigerators, washing machines, you do not keep investing in them time and again. But non-durable goods are the goods that are easily replenished and they need to be replaced. For example, your food items or your milk products. So for the first time since 2023, we saw that the pattern changed. Durables also went down and the non-durables also went down. So what does this tell us? This tells us that the demand is in serious distress. People do not have enough money to create enough demand. When they do not invest in durables, that is one thing. People are not investing in durables because durables are not essential items. They are non-essential items, discretionary items. So this tells us that the demand has reduced. Okay. But when people do not invest in non-durable also, which are essential items, that triggers something significant. That tells us that there could be a deep economic stress in the country. Because if essential items like, let's say, juice, honey, these things are also seeing a decline, it tells us that the households, they do not have disposable income in their hands. They do not have real money to create that kind of a demand. So why is all this happening? In fact, both urban and rural sector, both are facing this problem. So our urban demand is also weak despite the tax relief that we saw in this year's budget. Urban is also low and the rural demand is also low, but there are some hopes that the rural demand might increase because there is good monsoon and there will be a good agricultural season. So this can come up and the urban demand might increase during the time of festivities. So this is something, but a question should come to your mind that the GDP is increasing, the FDI is increasing, we are one of the fastest growing economies in the world, then why is the demand not increasing? Why do people not have enough money to invest on these things? This is because of something known as the K-shaped recovery. K-shaped recovery means that some sectors have recovered and some sectors are still struggling. For example, our MSME sector. MSME, which is one of the largest employers in the country, the MSME sector is still struggling. The gig workers, gig platform workers, they are still struggling. So these people, they do not have money in their hands to actually create that kind of demand. GDP only focuses on goods and services versus IIP is only goods. And when goods are not being produced, it is purely because there is not enough demand in the market. And when we also talk about FDI increasing, FDI is going to increase long-term investment. It is about creating employment in the long term. All these things will take some time to reflect in the economy. In fact, when we also say that the monetary policy was revised and the repo rates have gone down, that also takes some time to reflect in the economy because the banks immediately do not lower down their lending rates. So all these things will take some time to actually reflect changes in the economy. But for now, for the time being, we do not see a lot of disposable income in the hands of people, in the hands of rural households also, which make up a huge population of our workers. So all these things coupled together, they tell us that the economy is still suffering while the GDP is growing, but that growth is not inclusive. Only the topmost layer of the country is benefiting. The top 10%, 20% are benefiting, but the rest 80% are still not included. So our growth, while it is real, but it needs to be inclusive in nature. And so the structural challenges are that job creation is not as much, wage growth is not as much, and the consumption is lagging behind. Now imagine yourself in a situation where you're working, you get salary, but your salary has not been increased for a very long period of time, and the inflation is growing, the prices are increasing, but your wages have still remained the same and your job is also not stable. So are you going to invest in discretionary items or luxury items? You are not. You're going to be very cautious about your spending, and you're also going to be cautious about investing in essential items because your purchasing power has now been limited. And why are the jobs not stable? So jobs are not stable because AI and automation have come into picture. A lot of manual jobs have now been automated, and to bridge this gap, we'll have to upskill and reskill ourselves so that we are trained for the new kinds of jobs that are coming up in the industry. So all these things, when coupled together, they tell us that there are structural challenges in the economy right now. It is not just about GDP growth, it is not just about FDI growth or monetary policy revision. A lot of things need to happen at the ground level because the major demographic dividend right now is struggling with unemployment, is struggling with wage growth. So all these things need to be taken care of. There is a need for broad-based growth and MSME revival. As I mentioned, that MSME is one of the largest employers in the country, and MSME is still badly hit. So we need to be sure that MSME sector improves itself, improves the performance, the gig workers improve their performance, and people actually have real disposable income in their hands. So the way forward is that we need to boost mass consumption. We do not need money only with the hands of a few people in the economy because the GDP is going to rise when a few sectors perform well. That is not a problem, but it needs to be inclusive. The growth needs to be inclusive and people need to have money in their hands. So maybe we do DBT, we have direct benefit transfer, maybe we give money to people, or we have unemployment allowances, or we include subsidies here. So something of some sort needs to be done by the government so that the investment increases, the private investment also increases, and the consumption also boosts itself. MSME and informal sector needs to be revived, and we need to ensure that banks actually lower their lending rates. So when the repo rate goes down, it is not immediately reflected by the bank, and banks need to ensure that they lower their lending rates as soon as the repo rates are reduced. Skilling and education reforms are needed, and we need to rebalance growth. We just don't need to talk about GDP, we need to talk about real inclusive growth. And all these things take care of the domestic challenges. We need to make sure that our export-led manufacturing is also supported. So when all these things they come together, we'll be able to make sure that the demand also increases, and once the demand increases, the production is automatically going to increase, and only then we'll be able to ensure a wholesome growth. That was all for today's video. Now let us see if you're able to answer this question for prelims. With reference to India's economic indicators, consider the following statements. 1. The index of industrial production is a direct measure of GDP growth. 2. A slowdown in IIP may indicate weak consumer and investment demand. 3. Rising FDI inflows necessarily imply a rise in domestic consumption. Which of the statements is or are correct? A. 1 and 2 only. B. 2 only. C 2 and 3 only, D 1, 2 and 3. Please provide your answers in the comment section. I hope you found the discussion helpful, and until we meet the next time, please keep studying and keep revising.
For more informative content, like, share and subscribe, and do not forget to press the bell icon to get the notifications.